Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for the Proposal Development Workshop. This is number 5 in the series. If you want to contextualize, we'll do a little bit more of contextualization in a bit. My name is Faye Farmer. I'm the Executive Director of Research Development here at ASU, and Research Development hosts these proposal development workshops, and you're welcome to access any of them, all of them, none of them, at whatever pace you want. They're recorded and posted on our website, thanks to Jazzy Mosley, who's in the audience today. So you can access them whenever you might need them, and that means now or in the future. So I know we have a smaller group here, but I was wondering, could you find your emoticon and tell me if it's a thumbs up, I like to write, or is it a crying face? Monroe says no. Yeah, it's a crying face for you guys. Is it? Oh, Rachel's a good one. Okay. Yeah, and Jeffrey's there. Karen likes to write. So generally speaking, and Catherine likes to write. Okay. So there's a point where you are either dreading it or you're kind of getting more comfortable with it over time. And people who are more comfortable over time use specific tips and tricks, and we'll learn a little bit of those, of what I found handy as I've grown my writing skill and my muscle. So it's okay if you like to write, and it's okay if you don't like to write. You just need to practice usually. So my tip to you is don't reinvent the wheel. Always know that people are out there who have done this before. They might not have your ideas, they might not have your capabilities, your insight, or your resources, but generally speaking, somebody out there has done a YouTube video that will help you. And also you're a network of colleagues and collaborators. So you should always ask, have you done this? Is this experience that you can share with me? Don't always go for the proposal, though. Ask them for their experience more than anything, because proposals change over time and sponsor. So I encourage you to look at your network and see who else is out there that can help you as you start writing your proposals. I found that that's the strongest way to go about writing. So we're going to go through 3 steps, and the first 2 are going to be pretty easy. Step 1, always be compliant. There's got to be rules that are followed, and you will not be funded if you are not compliant. So we always recommend you read the solicitation from start to finish. And if there's no solicitation, get as much guidance as you can off of websites or previous experience or your program officer. Always be compliant. And how do you know that you're going to be compliant? Well, we have a PDW for you. Last PDW, Kaushik went through how to read a solicitation and look for all those keywords, musts and haves and shoulds. Those all appear. And then in addition to all the rules and implicit expectations of your sponsor, that's what you navigate. So go ahead and watch that PDW number 4, and I'll revise the slides, and come up to speed on how to become compliant, because you won't be looked at if you're not compliant. Step number 2, you have to know your audience. Who's going to read your proposal? Why are they going to care? What investment do they have in you and this project? Is it going to be, and what power do they have over you? That's important, because program officers exist at different agencies and have different powers over this, and influence over the decisions that sponsor makes. Historically, generally, again, there's always exceptions to the rule, philanthropic organization program officers have a lot more influence and power, whereas some other more hierarchical, like NIH, it's up to the review team to make recommendations on the proposal that they're reading. So you have to think and project into who is your audience. And we talk a little bit more in the research landscape PDW. So that one I got wrong too. I'll rename this. But it was PD1. We've added them since we've reorganized and added them since last year. But refer back to that PDW to understand who's your target market, who's your audience, and what's important to them. Because if you're not hitting what they want to see, then they're not, you're mismatched, and you're probably not going to be read. So those are some tools that we've already talked about in the PDW, and this. You'll notice we sneakily put in an arc to all the PDWs. I just wanted to refer back to those and kind of level set. So step 3 is really the meat of today's presentation, which is people must read your proposal. You have to entice them to turn that next page. And it's so hard, especially when you have multiple of them and it's late. And if you've done any reviewing, if you've done any student grading, if you're just tired and have a life, this might be a very high bar, right? So you want to be very conscious of how you bring people into your proposal. Now, this is oftentimes confused with marketing, but it's not true. It's mostly a clear and logical writing, and we'll go over that in the next step. So we'll cover 3 things in this section. There's logical narrative, there's clear language, and persuasive writing. So I know that the title of this presentation is called Persuasive Writing, and we kind of leave it towards the end because these things are fundamental to persuasive writing. You're not going to convince anybody of your argument if you're not making logical sense, if you're not clearly articulating what it is that they need to hear from you and is important about your project. These are scalable. All of the things we teach you are scalable and sponsor agnostic and discipline agnostic. These are best practices that we've found over years of doing this and that are highly recommended by all grant writers everywhere. So let's dive into logical narrative. One of my favorite, well, I don't read a lot of writing books. So this one is short. And so thus it is one of my favorites. The sense of style is a really great way of thinking about how people perceive what it is you're communicating, right? And for most people, it's hard to find your voice. It's because that takes practice and experience, but understanding how your writing is hitting the person who's receiving it is really an important feature of writing proposals. For manuscripts, there's a set method, there's a set practice, and the journal tells you what to write. In comparison, a proposal says, you know what, give me 15 pages of your best idea. So you're maybe reaching into different disciplines, you're reaching in to someone's life experience that may not be your own, and you're trying to convince them of this idea that you have and that will work, and that's that logical narrative. One of the papers that I like and that we'll send out after this is the Scopin and Swan 1990 article. It's so incredibly basic and so enlightening as well. And it really articulates this idea, which I come back to as a writer repeatedly, and you don't have to be a scientist to get this, is that once you lead with an idea and then create that proof, then the next idea has to logically link. Now, you would think that this would be fairly common, but it's hard in proposals because you get so excited and you assume an innate knowledge of your reader. Again, we need to know the audience. We need to understand a little bit more of what they bring to the table. But when we get very excited about our ideas, they can be a little hand wavy. They can be a little disjointed. And so every once in a while, when I think I'm losing that logical frame, I can go back to this article and refresh. Yes, it is important to leave breadcrumbs along and point back to content. Proposals are often under deadline as well, and this does not help with our writing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about clear language. Again, I'm not going to, oh, and I guess my, my animation's odd. Be clear. Again, these are maybe self-evident, but it reminds you to be present when you're writing proposals. And again, that's why we're kind of going over it quickly. But clear writing does indicate clear thinking. You know this as instructors. When you get papers from your students and they're all over the map, they're trying to convince you of something that maybe they haven't read. I've done it. So if you're sharp and you and we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, in part of the editing PDW, which is the next one, thinking about that logical order to get the reader from where they are to where you need them to be. And then to be very elemental in understanding the sentence structure and how to organize it. That's important here. You don't want to use convoluted language or really strange rhetorical structures. You don't want to be elaborate. You want to actually be much more technical in your presentation and just in terms of the order of your sentences. And that's important to remember as well. A paper done by someone at ASU, he's in engineering, Dr. Holman actually uses this in his course, how to write a scientific manuscript. Again, the rules are really not horribly different between manuscripts. The difference is the audience and the purpose of the writing. But I like that he calls out that writing does reveal the holes in your argument. And oftentimes when we work with faculty, when they're writing out the proposal, they have a clear conception in their mind of how they want to get from point A to point B, but they don't know exactly how to get to point B. And now if you remember being logical, you have to say, dear audience member, I have the core capabilities and assets to get to point B. Then you're going and you're doing that logical sentence structure and you're writing very clearly, then it should be obvious how you're getting from point A to point B. And the act of writing allows you to see where your holes are. Now, proposals, they can be somewhat, they can pitch over what you're actually capable of doing. But again, no, there cannot be holes. There cannot be gaps in what you're providing because the reviewers will no longer take you seriously because you don't know what it's going to take to achieve your goals. Again, we're just kind of building on this idea where as you start writing, you need to be considering logical flow and clear language. So now we're going to jump into persuasive writing. And that's kind of the meat of today's presentation. That will also be short. It's short, but I'm also going to give you a tip/trick that I want you to practice at home. And our art director has finished a worksheet that I will send out after this because it's a way of writing, a style writing, a conceptualization of writing that will help you think more persuasively. Yeah, and it's only really appropriate for proposals. So it's a tip and a trick that's unique to the proposal development workshop and why you came today. So there are types of writing. The technical, which are completely just tell me what you did and how you did it. And yes, some could argue that manuscripts could be flowery. I think that's more of like nature science. Most manuscripts are to convey an idea, like I did this and you can do it too, to test me and check my assertions. They tend to be descriptive. They follow a logical argument. They hopefully are clear, but they describe the intent and purpose is to say, I did this. Persuasive is really an emotional connection with your reader to say, this is really important because fill in the blank. And you need to give me funding, the most precious resource in the world, so that I can make it come true. So this includes a passionate argument. This includes sometimes more assertive language. Some people do say it's sales and marketing-ish, and I wouldn't disagree, but I would also say that it's a convincing of your reader, right? And you have to convince them in order to get your funding. Another way to think about this is I can describe a heart or I can make them feel love. Those are two different purposes and two different documents. So another movie that you all should see is Thank You for Smoking, which is the background here. How do you convince people to do something even though you may not, they might not want to part with their money? That's persuasive writing. You can do that a couple of different ways. And it's, again, intentionality in your writing. One is voice, and the second one is lead with a benefit. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about voice, because I think these are somewhat inherent rules of proposal writing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. That, again, is practice. We're going to move right to lead with a benefit, which is that conceptually harder bit. So for voice, let's see if I can go here. We recommend that you, when allowable by your sponsor rules, again, you always want to be compliant, you write in first person active, right? So it, similar to juvenile fiction is written in the first person perspective, because when we're juveniles, when we're, middle school and early high school and maybe high school, it's all about us. It's all about our world. And we want to see characters that are feeling what we're feeling. So that's a neat little narrative trick to say, look, I am doing this. Make me the center of your attention, because they'll most likely identify with the things that you want to do. And if you're vulnerable and clear, then they'll see that passion. First person active allows them to, the reader, to understand what exactly you're going to be doing and when. Third person active is, someone's over to the side and they can't relate to that. Remember, persuasive writing is about relating to your audience and your reader. So connecting emotionally with your reader. Third person creates the distance and objectivity. Sometimes there's a reason for that. And so I wouldn't discourage it, but we highly recommend first person active. Second person has different objectives as well. And passive really is not ideal. It is kind of backwards speak. So nobody accepts responsibility for anything. And which creates a hole in your proposal argument, right? So if our technique is the dependent character, then our technique is funded, not us. So active voice, again, just as a reminder, connects the reader to you. You deserve their attention, and then they can see you as a peer who's worthy of accomplishing your goals. So just an example, 3 potential partners were examined, functional, but it turns into, I looked at 3 potential partners. I did this. I want to advance this in the future realm, right? Just, it has a different connection when you read it. The center will provide educational opportunities to 50 students. You can go, this again, editing at the next workshop can tell you how to revise sentences, but the power changes, right? I will provide educational opportunities. Finally, as part of the center, I will provide education opportunities. If funded at the center level, I will be doing all these activities. Finally, just as a performing arts example, I will perform in the community theater. I have the partnerships. I connect with my audience. Ways to check, always. Who's acting on whom and what's the emphasis of the sentence? My recommendation to you as you write your proposals is to always look at the focal point being you and your activity and your collaborators and the work you will do, especially as you continue to write and develop that voice. So then I give you an example. Anybody want to give it a shot? So create your sentence for the next workshop. Okay, this is a pro tip, and it's a strange one, but you can create a style guide. Once you start learning your rhythm and way that you speak and the way that you conceptualize your research, create a style guide. Use it in Google Docs and update it as needed, but keep a reference. Say, I talk about ASU in this way. I talk about my position in this way. I talk about the work that I'm doing in this way. And that might change by sponsor, but tracking how you're presenting your information can also be tracked over time by sponsor. So if you're getting a lot of traction with a certain construction of, I am working in this educational opportunity space versus I provide training to students, see how that floats. And you can actually keep notes on some of that language usage. Then once you start collaborating with others, it can be shared. And just to make sure that you're consistent. Again, that's a little bit of a pro tip and a little next level, but it's worked very well for us in the past. So let's talk now about leading with a benefit, which is conceptually the hardest thing in the world. I love it, but it takes a minute for everybody to kind of wrap their brain around it. I'm sure you're more than qualified and capable today. So everything does have a benefit, from art to manufacturing. Art exists because we need to appreciate the world around us. We need to make sense of things we're seeing and experiencing. And art provides this space where we can come together, or as an individual, and rationalize the world around us. Manufacturing obviously has a little bit more of a direct deliverable where we can't operate without things. And so manufacturing delivers the things that make our life better and easier. Even theoretical math has a benefit. Even computer sciences theory, even fill in the blank. Things without tangible outcomes have a benefit. Somebody has found them of value and has invested in them, created disciplines and fields around them, that everything has a benefit. So we're not looking at, again, we're looking at scalable, sponsor, and discipline agnostic rules. There are 4 key concepts for identifying the benefit. Now I put them in order for a reason, because once you practice the order, then it's much easier to identify what the benefit is. I'm going to go over these in turn. So a feature is a discrete aspect of your idea, approach, or solution. A feature is, I have a data set, I have a technique, I have a lab that can do something, I have performance experience in a certain environment. Those features are unique to you, perhaps, but they are things you can wrap your hands around. They have boundaries. Those features are things you're offering to the funder. From there, the next step is to identify the advantages. How does that one aspect of your research portfolio create an advantage for the sponsor? And generally speaking, they fall in 3 broad categories: time, money, and risk. So you decrease time to discovery, you decrease the funding that's needed for something, or you optimize risk, or you decrease risk. So I've already done this for you. I've de-risked this technique. I have it fully fleshed out, and so you don't have to do it. So the advantage of, say, a technique is that I have done all of this around it. It is a feature of my research, and because I have this feature, you can invest in me because I've de-risked it. It works. We've shown that it works. So a benefit ties that advantage, I've shown how it works, to solve a funder's problem. So, and this takes a little bit more work for me to do personally. You probably have gotten it, but the advantage is, so I've de-risked it, and I'm going to give it you for the low price of $5. And if you give me $5, I will apply this feature of my research, and it will find something amazing out, and it will make both of us look good. And that's the benefit. A differentiator is a feature that is unique to you and important to the sponsor. Now, I say that because you might have a technique. If I have a technical approach, I am not maybe like an engineering technical thing. I don't know what, a microscope. I'm not going to go ask the National Endowment for Humanities to fund my microscope. My microscope might be the best thing since sliced bread, but NEH isn't going to fund it because it's not of interest. Now, if I have something that's very unique to me in terms of an audience or a technique or a performance type of approach that would be very interesting to NEH, then yes, that's a differentiator. So understanding why it's important and who it's important to is part of marrying that persuasive language. It's knowing the goals of your audience and the purpose of that funding that makes it more logical that you're gonna argue for money and get it from that particular sponsor. Now, I'm using very basic examples. So when you do this in real life, your solicitations might ask for something specific, and you need to pivot your features to match what that solicitation is asking you for. You have to really think through, is it a feature of my research? And does it confer an advantage in some way to this funder's goals? And then can I then describe it as a benefit to the funder? And then finally, is it a discriminator? Is it something that's unique to me? Am I the only person with a microscope applying for this program? If I'm not, then I have a competition. It's not a discriminator anymore. These are things you have to walk through as you start creating your persuasive argument towards this proposal. Again, completely scalable, sponsor agnostic, and discipline agnostic. So let me run you through a few examples. Very simple one. I'll let you read this. It's hard for me to be quiet. It's hard for me to be quiet. So here we have a special technique that I'm very excited about. So I'm leading with it. And I'm saying that you can be used by anybody you want. And we can apply it to historical documents. So completely functional. It's, first person plural. That's okay. Totally adequate. Am I convincing anybody that I need money for it? Yeah, let's see. So let's apply this to that experience. So I'm doing this backwards. Let me just bring them all in. Didn't check the animation. So our feature is the spectral imaging, and we have an interdisciplinary team. So technically we have 2 features, and that's allowable. We think with both these together are features that we can use in this context. The advantage is that we can see things that were previously missed using this approach. The benefit is, oh, you know what? We can open whole new realms of scholarship because we're now looking at documents that were previously thought unusable. Now, is this something that my funder wants? Maybe. So I'm going to create this sentence that says, yeah, dear sponsor, you do. The team is the only team. I am the only person who has this particular constellation of people, and we pioneered the fact that we can use this in historical documents. And that's important to you because you own, perhaps, or have access to either the scholars who want to use it or the historical documents, or you're in the business of just making things easier to access and to more people. So if we change this, well, we're going to look at it real quick here. There's the feature and discriminator, and there's your benefit. So again, most people write this way. I write this way. But how do we make it so that we're leading with a benefit to become more persuasive? Again, functional text, fine, but how do we increase that persuasion? This is one way. I'll let you read it. So now we're convincing people that this will be a good thing for many more people. Here it is. And there's your benefit. And you can still include your feature and discriminator. And by making it a discriminator or differentiator, I interchange those, sorry. You can say our interdisciplinary team of biologists and medical professionals. It's an inherent, it's mine. Okay, so this is what we end up being. That's the difference. And it's just a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more future cast. And if I have a sponsor my implicit understanding is that my sponsor finds this of value. Benefit statements are scalable and flexible once you get good at them. Well, actually, you don't even have to be good at them. You just need them. However, once you get good at them, the benefit statements, it's like a muscle you can flex. And you can put it at the top level of your proposal and say, this whole idea is important to you for the following reasons. But you can also put it in each paragraph. And what I like to do is look at the first 4 paragraphs of your proposal as you've written them. Look through, it's usually a 3rd or 4th paragraph that you're starting to get into what the sponsor will find important. Most people are trained in sciences to lead with the problem statement. Absolutely okay. And if culturally that's what you want to do, go for it. But you can keep that problem statement right after your benefit statement. Again, culturally, it's up to you, but it makes it a little bit more stronger and assertive just out of the gate. Once you identify that benefit in the 3rd or 4th paragraph, move it up to the top. Check it against what my recommendations are. Does it call out a feature? Does it call out an advantage? And then you can do it by paragraph. You can do it by section of proposal. If you have an intellectual merit section, you can apply this concept to the intellectual merit first sentence of that paragraph. If you have broader impacts, go ahead and do it there. If you have a plan outside, like a postdoc mentoring plan, you can do the same thing. What is it that's unique about your, what feature do you have that you're going to apply to postdoc mentoring? And I bet you can come up with something. These are just examples of sections that this would work in. Right? And most people don't think facilities and equipment need a benefit statement. However, what you're trying to convince your funder of is that you have what it needs, what you have adequate capability and capacity to achieve the goals that you're articulating in the proposal. Facilities and equipment are often overlooked as just boilerplate, and I would argue that they're great strategic documents as well. Okay, so let's test it. So if you get a proposal that says, we found a neurotoxin, here's our proposal, go, right? It doesn't resonate, right? We don't need, there's no reasoning, there's no rationale. I don't want to fund you. All of a sudden I'm tossing you aside, right? So smile, I told you the answer. No, you wouldn't fund it. Fresh out of cash. So let's break it down and make it a little bit more powerful. So we do have drugs from chemical synthesized from black mama. So we know we've extracted these chemicals. We know that we can treat Alzheimer's. This is completely fictitious, by the way. We know that they are more effective and less expensive than what's on the market because we've done some studies, some preliminary studies. Well, if we're going for somebody who is really interested in Alzheimer's and maybe decreasing the costs, this is going to benefit them, right? So 50%, what did I say? 50% decrease in costs. That's huge, right? And then we know that we are the only people who can connect across 3 countries. And we have the research data to prove what we're doing. And we can back that up with published data. Like, that's huge, right? So all of a sudden we are the ones you want to fund, but it's taken me 3 sentences to get there, right? So the basic requirement is we're going to work with our partners, and we're going to go ahead and synthesize this neurotoxin to bind to nerve cells. This is a completely adequate sentence. And if it's at the beginning of my proposal, it's going to tell me exactly what you're going to do. Check. However, and then we'll walk through. Perhaps we could edit it to start thinking about what makes us important. So this front end is completely the same, and how they could be used. So here we have how they could be used. There's the benefit for Alzheimer's. Still on the bottom though, so I'm still taking a minute to get to the benefit. So again, we're adding text. You can edit it later, but we're making it more convincing. All of a sudden, we know we're going to partner with these people. We're going to look at this, and all of a sudden we have numbers now. So we're wrapping our brain around the problem statement, which is, again, okay. It's a big problem. It costs a lot. And the next sentence says that we can solve this problem. And we create proof by this little reference. So we've given them proof and evidence of the fact that we are the ones who can do this. And so it's a little bit more convincing. Again, we're not going for effective, we're going for convincing. The idea in persuasive writing is to convince them to give you money. So we're getting closer, and we can see that. There's the differentiator. We're the ones who have published in this area. Now, what if we go from left to right, which is the functional, to the better, right? So all of a sudden we have, we're gonna partner, and our benefits at the bottom. It's still getting, yeah, I think that's what we were gonna do. I think that's not the most powerful last statement. So the next phrase would be moving that we're going to help everybody with Alzheimer's, and move that up a little bit. So it's probably not the best example. I think I'm missing an animation. But on the worksheet, we're going to send out after this. You'll see the full final. Okay, so we're a little bit more convinced that this will be funded because we've made this argument that we are the people to do it, and that it's going to make this massive change in the world. Now, you don't have to have that massive change. You just need some kind of impact that's articulated for the funder. What are they going to get for funding you? The way to think about this is, after you do the 4 sequential pieces in the prior slides, then you want to map them in a different way. So again, when I said earlier, you have to go through these 4 in sequence, because conceptually it's just easier for us to do. You might be very talented, in which case you can do what you want, but I need to do it in the sequence. Then you take the benefit, you move it to the first sentence, and then you add your feature and your evidence and proof, which is either publication or, it could be anything, any kind of proof. If you're arguing that your experience is what brings you to the table and that's unique to you, then you say, I got a PhD in X. And then the differentiator is something you can add on at the end. It's not always required. We do highly recommend that you always lead with a benefit to convince people, and then add proof to back up that statement. Okay, pro tip, almost last pro tip. We have free proposal editing, and it's at this link, and you should take advantage of it. Having someone read your proposal, anyone read your proposal, ensures that, number one, you're hitting the logical narrative, you're hitting the clear thinking, and and sometimes if you give them the solicitation, they'll do compliance checks too. That's really important to know, because really, I know you're obsessed with writing the proposal, and that's great, but we can lose sight of what the actual objective of that proposal is, which is to get through all of these hoops so that you can be read and convince your audience that you're worth funding. And we all know you are. And with that, I want to encourage you to come to the next PDW, which is going to cover proposal editing. And I'll take questions if you have them. We can pause them too.
I have a question. This is Sadat. I'm going to stay off camera if that's okay.
Absolutely okay.
So something I struggle with in my own proposal writing is, you know how like in grade school, you're told you cannot use the word you're defining in the definition. And so oftentimes I fall into a similar rhetorical trap in which the motivation and the act that the intervention I'm proposing and the motivation are the same. I'm like, oh, we should do this because it's really important. And it's really important because we like, right. So I find myself like oftentimes like it's like a rhetorical, like circular trap. So what are your recommendations or strategies for, I guess, thinking through it or getting yourself to articulate the why? Because I find myself, I'm kind of doing it in this explanation, just going in a circle, right? Like I'm chasing my own tail. Like it's really obvious to me, but I don't know how to get myself to like break out of it.
Oh, I hear you. I think that's really an intriguing question. And I thank you very much for bringing it forward. My instant reaction is lead with why, think about why it's important to them, the people who are reading it. And I think Quinn's on too, and I'll double check this with Quinn. But if you instead said, I almost start with the problem statement and then say this problem statement impacts your funder in the following way. You need to almost add that third party to the conversation, because your circular argument is you answering the question over and over again, rather than why you're pitching to a funder. I would also recommend that you go back a PDW and look at Quinn's Distilling the Message. In that presentation, he uses the Heilmeyer Catechism as an example to streamline your argument. And it's a weirdly STEMmy thing to do, but it works across disciplines. And one of the first questions it asks is, what gap are you filling, right? Why is this important? Who's going to fund it, if not us? And just breaking that cycle of thinking it's important and it will have impact. Maybe some technique like that will linearize your conceptualization of your argument. I would break your pattern using some external sounding board, is my professional opinion. And I'll ask Quinn if he would do that as well.
Hi. Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I was thinking that it's almost one of those things where it's so important to get yourself out of your own shoes and put yourself in the shoes of the funder as much as you can. I was trying to think, even sometimes it helps to put yourself in the shoes of who else might be writing this. And so in a sense, who would be competing with you and who would be coming in from sort of a different direction. So you can really think about, I mean, a lot of it does come down to what are some of your own differentiators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that idea. Is to, and who are your competitors? Is everyone thinking that same intervention is just as important? And if not, think about the argument for your approach then, right?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you both. I really appreciate it.
That was a really good question.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're not the only one.
Thank you.
Hey, I have a question.
For sure.
So the free proposal editing, is there a minimum of the grant dollars that they will do that? How far in advance do you recommend putting it in? And is there a conversation after the edits, or do we just get edits?
These are also good questions. There's not a threshold, and there is a time factor though. So you do need to finish your proposal as early as possible so that they can have a time to go through it. There's a team there, and once you submit it, they will tell you kind of an ETA. I'm generally recommending a week, and that gives you that you want to build in the timeline for getting the edits back so that you can review them and incorporate them. So that takes another couple of days with everybody's busy schedule. So at least probably 2 weeks before the sponsor deadline is ideal. I am unfamiliar with their process. Their edits, to my knowledge, have been fairly straightforward. So I've actually never asked to meet them afterwards, but I'm sure that they wouldn't be opposed to it.
Great, thank you.
For sure. Okay. I will say Daniel's on the call. He's going to do editing next week, and it's tips and tricks that should accelerate some process here too. Okay. I will happily give you back your 18 minutes. If you have follow-up questions at all, just feel free to give us a shout out. I will send this recording plus some backup documents that may be helpful or useful within the week. Thank you all for attending. It's lovely to see you.